Hey everybody, welcome back to Zombie Tactics. The title of the video tonight, Noah's Ark and Shooting Statistics. I always try to give you these weird little titles to get your attention. But let me get to the Noah's Ark part right off the bat because I think that kind of sets the tune for the whole video. By the way, this is going to be one of my longer videos. I apologize for that, but I think that there's some important things in this video. Important to me anyway. Whether they're important to you, I'll let you make up your own mind. So just be aware we're going to go a little longer than the usual 10 minutes or less video that I've got here. It might be worth your time. If you don't like it, I'm sure that somewhere FPS Russia is blowing something up, and that'll fill your evening's entertainment with joy. But Noah's Ark. The idea is this, that one day Noah, he's in the middle of building this ark, and he goes, this is costing me so much money and so much time, and the neighbors are complaining, and the planning committee and the county board of supervisors and everybody are mad at me, whatever. So he decides to hire an efficiency expert to come in and figure out how he can shorten this whole project up and not cost so much money and make everybody happier. So the efficiency expert comes in and he's writing down all this information. He's asking Noah a bunch of questions. He's asking, the neighbors that are mad about this crazy idiot building a boat in the middle of nowhere, about the project. And he's asking the city fathers and he's asking the planning commission and everything. And he comes to Noah and he says, I figured it out. I know exactly how you can take only half as long to build this ark, and it's only going to cost you half as much money. And Noah goes, great, lay it on me, brother. And he says, it's simple. All you have to do is only take one of each animal. You don't have to build as big a boat, that kind of thing. Now, see, this is why it's not really a joke. I've tried to turn it into a joke, and it doesn't really have a punchline. Now, of course, the point is that Noah is not building an ark just so that he can have a big boat and he wants to throw some animals on it. The point is he needs to have at least two of each animal so that after there's the great flood, or whatever God's going to do, because he didn't really, exactly explain everything to Noah. After this great flood that's going to wipe out all life on earth, and you still want to have llamas around. Well, we all know how it works. You've got a mama llama and a daddy llama, and they get together and they do a special cuddle. And now we can have a lot of new baby llamas, and we can populate the earth with llamas and, everything else that there was on the ark, I guess. So the point is, technically, the efficiency expert is right. You only take one of each animal. Hey, you don't need as big a boat. But he completely misses the idea of what you're trying to accomplish in the first place. And this is one of the problems when you start dealing with numbers and statistics, particularly shooting statistics and analysis of shooting incidents and things like that, is that sometimes the meaning of the thing gets lost in the numbers, and people start playing games, intentionally or not, with these numbers, and all of a sudden they lose track of what the entire point is. Now, this came to me recently because somebody was talking to me about a video that James Yeager did where he was talking about the Smith & Wesson M&P Shield. It's a brand new single stack 9mm pistol. It's supposed to be a pretty good gun, right? And one of the things that Yeager mentioned in that video was that he considers it to meet his standards, his personal James Yeager standards for what he considers a fighting pistol. And one of those things is, well, it holds at least 8 rounds. And he based that it holds at least 8 rounds thing on a bunch of information, including his brief reference to crime statistics that show that, in an average incident, this kind of thing happens, and that kind of thing happens, and the other thing happens. Well, somebody said to me, well, now, wait a minute. Yeager's 8-round thing doesn't really jibe with the statistic he quoted, because the statistic said it's something like, 3 rounds, 3 seconds, 3 rounds, 3 feet, 3 yards, 3 rounds, 3 seconds, it's over. If you only need 3 rounds, why is he going for 8? And this shows you how if somebody hears a statistic and they misapply it, they're not going to understand what's going on. I'll get back to that. By the way, Yeager's not the one who doesn't get it. My friend that I'm talking to doesn't get it, and I'll explain to you why. Now, I want you to imagine, as another example, imagine that, just to kind of show you how things can get confused, imagine that you were going to boil some water in one pot, and you were going to put, liquid CO2 just at the point of freezing in another pot on your stove and just let it sit there. Now, liquid CO2, I think it's, somebody's going to correct me on this, I know, but it's well below zero. It's like negative 70 something, I think, negative 70 something, or right around there, and it might be negative 28, I don't know, but it's really freaking cold. It's way below freezing. If you put your hand in it, you're going to end up with, So you got boiling water in one pot, and you've got below the freezing point of your hand in the other pot. Well, now, if you poured these two pots together under the right circumstances, they'd average out to be a fairly comfortable temperature. Maybe something kind of in the 90s or whatever. The way the thermodynamics work, I'm not entirely sure. But, if you poured them together and you created kind of an average of the temperatures, well, it would be a fairly comfortable temperature. But that average doesn't tell you whether putting your hand in a pot of boiling water is going to hurt you, or putting your hand in a pot of below freezing water is going to hurt you. So you see, the averages don't tell the whole picture. And whenever you have somebody telling you, well, the average shooting incident is this, and the average number of hits is that, and the average number of seconds this happens, and the average number of feet, you got to keep in mind those are averages. And when you're talking about an average, you've got to know that, well, that means that, yeah, there are, like in our example, there are just as many cases where the water is going to be way below freezing as there are cases where it's way above boiling, and all kinds of things in between. So that average tells you, well, a number, but it doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the situation that you're going to encounter. If you ask somebody what's the average temperature in California, because I'm going to go bike riding there, they're going to tell you, well, the average temperature in California is about 75 degrees, man, so don't worry about it. You don't worry about taking any special clothing, don't worry about taking any water, don't worry about anything. Well, that's stupid, because there are places in California that are among the hottest places on Earth. You get in the middle of the Mojave Desert, and there are roads there, and people go biking there, believe it or not, where it's like 134 degrees in the middle of the day. You mean to tell me that if you don't have water with you, and you don't have some other things, you're not going to be in some trouble? There are some other parts of California that, depending upon the time of year and what you're doing, they're way below freezing. So you tell somebody, well, the average temperature is 75 degrees. Don't bring a coat, don't bring anything. Well, all of a sudden they end up in there in the middle of the Sierras and it's freezing. Well, they're in trouble. See, the average is just a number that may or may not mean anything. Now, people generally get confused about math anyway. If you talked about sales tax to most people, and this is a test I used to give people as part of an employment screening, I said, all right, the sales tax now in California, because it was at the time, is 5%, and you're going to ring up a sale. If it's $1, how much money is the person going to have total? Well, it's going to be $1.05, right? Because $1 plus 5% sales tax, that's $1.05. All right, great. Everybody gets that question right. And I say, all right, next year the sales tax is going to go up 20%. What is somebody going to pay now if the amount of money of the item marked is $1? It's not going to be $1.05 anymore, because it's not going to be 5% sales tax anymore. Sales tax is going up 20%. And I'm really interested in the way finding out if people think about stuff like that, because you have people who would say, well, if the sales tax is going up 20%, that means it's going to be 25% next year. No, because 20% would be adding 20%, not going up by 20%. See? And politicians play games with these numbers too. Well, if it goes up 20%, what would it be? Well, 20%, the sales tax is going up 20%. 20% of 5 is 1. So if it goes up by that amount, it's 6%. So it'd be $1.06 the year after that. Now, if you got that math or not, I don't really care. This is not like a trick question, and I'm not, you're not in a job interview with me, so tell me to just, leave you alone or something. But the point is, people get confused by numbers too. So you start talking about things like averages, percentages. This many people do that. Well, the average of this, and all of a sudden it's a giant confused thing. One of the things that I constantly hear is a thing about how, well, the average, when you get in a gunfight, you're only going to get 20% of your hits. That's all that you're going to ever hit, because the averages say, and the FBI says this, and so the FBI bears it out, and so that's all you're ever going to get, is because the FBI says so. Well, no, the FBI doesn't say that. The FBI says that they studied a certain number of incidents of FBI agents when they got in gunfights, and I believe that this is the one that Yeager was referring to, and they showed that anywhere from 2 to 7 shots were fired in cases where they were fired, and that in most cases it amounted in only 2 good hits, regardless of how many shots were fired. And that study was, I don't know, a while back, and it's often included as a part of a 1994 study that Patrick Urey did on handgun bullet wound effectiveness and stuff like that. But there again, that's an average. What does that average tell you? Well, it tells you the average of what the FBI agents are doing. Some FBI agents are getting 60, 70, 80% of their hits. Some of them are getting 100% of their hits. They fire their weapon twice and they hit both times. That's 100% of the time. Some FBI agents are firing their guns 7 times and not making any hits, and so they are shooting a lot and they're not hitting anything. And by the time you put them all together, it comes to, well, it's about 20%. What does that tell you about the performance of any particular FBI agent? Nothing. What does it tell you about your performance with a handgun? Absolutely nothing. Your performance is going to be up to whatever level you train to. And the FBI is like most law enforcement agencies. They train, they qualify. They don't necessarily go through training that's, hard charging, rolling around on the ground doing all kinds of stuff. They're a policing agency. Most FBI agents through the course of their career will never have an opportunity to even draw their weapon in the course of their duties. Think about this for a second, because people will come along and they'll tell you, oh, you can't do this, oh, you can't do that. You need this many rounds in your gun. You don't need that many rounds in your gun. Nobody ever needs anything but a revolver. And it's all based on, oh, they read a statistic, and they have no idea what the statistic means. And now they're ready to tell you, well, the statistics say. The statistics don't say that at all. The statistics tell you an average level of performance. It doesn't tell you what any one of those little guys does and what makes the difference. Well, guess what? I study these things too. I look into the FBI National Crime Reporting Statistics. I look into SOP9. I look into data from various law enforcement agencies and citizens groups and things like that. And I've come to some determinations of my own. Guess what? There are some parts of the country where the police departments, they get something like 68% of the time that they fire a weapon, that round fits its mark and it's a good hit. There are other police departments where it really is kind of that below 20% figure. 12% is one figure that I saw for another police department. So don't be saying that you can't get any better than a 20% hit ratio. That's up to you and how you train. This affects our thinking and how we train and how we select weapons and how we do all kinds of stuff immediately. So what I want you to do is whenever you hear somebody say, oh, the FBI says this, oh, the NICS report is this, oh, the SOP9 says this, well, look into the data, because the data is where the real information is. The averages don't tell you squat. This is why we get back to the situation with Jaeger saying, well, the FBI says that the average handgun fight is 3 rounds, 3 yards, 3 seconds. That statistic is true. That average is true. That's a true number. But the reason why Jaeger's going to go on and tell you later, well, I think that a combat pistol or a fighting pistol needs to have 8 rounds, is based on the fact that he understands that. He understands that's an average. He understands that, what he's going to encounter has nothing to do with what the average is. He may not ever have to draw his weapon again in his life, in which case, how many rounds does he need in a gun? None. He may find himself in a firefight tomorrow with somebody that, has a grudge against him back when he was on a police department in Tennessee. And that guy gets together 2 or 3 biker gang guys and he's after him, None of those things is an average situation, but those are all situations that happen. There was an armed robbery that happened not too long ago where 7 people broke into a house, and a man and his wife, they held them off with a shotgun. That's not an average situation at all either, but it's a situation that happened, and it's not so atypical that you can say, oh wow, that never happens in America. So the averages are crap. The averages are just a number to sort of get you thinking about things. In my way of thinking, the averages are the lowest common denominator of performance. That's the lowest level of performance that you will sink to. Why do I think that? Because most of the time in those averages, there's a whole lot of people in there that they don't have any experience with a weapon at all, or they have really minimal experience. They were a cop on a police force 20 years ago. They qualified every year. They never did any training other than that. They were in the military. They learned to work an M4. rifle. They never really had any rifle. They never really had any handgun training. Well, now they have a handgun. How proficient is that person? We don't know. So there's an awful lot of people like that in the averages. I'm interested in becoming something other than the average person, because I know that the situations that I encounter in my life are probably going to be something other than average too. Getting back to Jaeger and the Smith & Wesson Shield, and this isn't an ad for the Shield, I'm just discussing this as an example. Why does he think that 8 rounds is what he wants in a fighting handgun? Well, it probably goes something like this. He knows that the average is 3 yards, 3 seconds, 3 rounds fired. Okay? But the average is just that stupid average number. He doesn't know anything about that, what that really means. When you dive into the actual data, you say, well, wait a minute. I can see a certain number of incidents here where nobody fires a gun at all. That's 0 rounds fired. I can see a few cases here where, wow, that was a 20-yard shot. But I want to prepare myself, and I want my kit to support what are the likely situations that I might encounter. I want to be prepared for as many things as I can possibly be. So a handgun with 7, 8 rounds in it, 8 rounds in Jaeger's case is the number that he picks. That means when I look at the data, that covers me not just for the average case, but it covers me for almost any kind of case that I'm conceivably going to encounter. And the ones that I'm not going to encounter, a tribe of Bigfoot with RPGs strapped on their backs, well, that's 1%, 2% of the cases that could ever possibly happen or will never happen at all. I'm not worried about that. I can't, walk around with a bazooka on my back every day of my life. So 7, 8 rounds makes perfect sense, even though the average statistic says 3 rounds, 3 seconds, 3, yards, whatever. That kind of thing. You can't be fooled by these statistics. You have to look into the actual data. And anybody who wants to give you a raw statistic and say, oh, well, you're never going to get it. You're never going to get any hits because only 20% of the time, and I'm going to wildly gesticulate here like some guy does. You have to understand that because the averages are, that's never what you're ever going to get, blah, blah, blah. A person's an idiot, or they don't understand the statistics and they don't understand how to look at those statistics. Kind of a rambling video, but I want you to think about this, and I want you to think about statistics as something that you need to look into a little deeper, because it's not just the averages, it's not just the minimums, it's what you want to train for. And I suggest to you that if you're somebody who's watching my channel, you're likely of a different mindset, and you probably want to be the kind of person who's training for something other than the average, or what I consider the most minimal, lowest common denominator of performance. Hopefully you never have to use that skill level. Hopefully that mindset level is not something that you'll never have to employ. But if you do, it's better to train and have those skills and that mindset available than it is to let yourself fall prey to a mindset which leaves you unprepared for anything except the most average, minimal kind of situation where you might have to defend your life. That's Zombie Tactics for tonight, and hopefully the next video will be shorter. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.